Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and this video we're breaking down Alien Earth. We are back on the Neverland Ranch, island, after a detour to the Maginot last week. Episode 6 is packed with Easter eggs, hidden details, and a lot of things that tease the future. Returning to our hybrids, we're reaching the endgame now as the monsters are getting loose and Morrow's trying to assault the island. While it hasn't exactly promised the alien invasion title of Alien Earth, it's been gripping nonetheless. Should call it Alien Island and Alien Block of Flats. Neverland will most likely be the focus of the remaining episodes though, and this is why we get shots of that between the recap snippets. This also turns the Xenomorph shots that we've had throughout the series. The only one it was missing from was episode 4, where we got the doll's head on the beach. The Xeno didn't pop out until the end, but now it's here, so it makes sense to include it, even if it's the dead one. What this does is also confirm that the one we've been seeing is indeed that one from the start. Also felt like the way the creature fades in over the top of the shots of the island symbolically makes it seem like it's infecting it. Noah Hawley is all about superimposition and how two images can be laid over the top of each other to create some kind of metaphor. I'm a sort of film analysis, sort of an ending explainer, you see. We also have a shot of the creature on the slab next to someone else, which I believe is Bronski recovered from the Maginot. The creature was born from him, and again, it's a marrying of these two things. In these intros, we're always observing something, and it speaks to the voyeuristic nature of the show. This is something that Scott wanted the opening to feel like in the original, almost like we were wandering through the corridors ourselves. That's brought over to the show here, and we get a long shot of a corridor. Just in case you forgot, Alien began with long pans through the Nostromo, and that's sort of what we're doing with the facilities here. In Alien, we then cut to the helmet, which in itself was designed to look like an egg. Here we get a corridor shot, and then cut to the eggs as Cavalier reads Peter Pan. It's the start of the book with Mrs. Darling, and is called Peter Breaks Through. With the breaking through, potentially be talking about the Xenomorph being out, what happens with Toodles, what happens with Slightly, and yeah, lots of different characters. In the chapter though, Wendy's mother wants her to stay young forever. The girl, however, knows that she has to grow up, and it's an inevitable part of life. This also ties in with death and immortality. Wendy's mother wants her to stay young forever, which is something she could achieve at Netherland. However, she leaves that knowing full well she'll die one day. In the show, the corporations are trying to find immortality, but deep down, we know that isn't possible. You have to copy your consciousness across, and is that even you, or is it a machine basically mimicking your personality? AI at the moment, very scary how much it can mimic things, whether it's art, writing styles, and you do kind of wonder if in the future it'll be able to do personalities as well. In the book, Wendy of course also leaves and grows up in the end. And how this applies to the episode, we know that it's something that Joe wants for his sister. I'm unsure exactly how long Wendy's been a hybrid, but it could be coming up to like around 2 years, which makes the line,
"You always know after you're 2. 2 is the beginning of the end."
very apt here. I also wonder if 2 extends beyond age. We have our 2 connected characters in Wendy and the Xenomorph. Them 2 coming together is the end, and the 2 could also apply to Joe as well. We also have the 2 corporations meeting in Boy and Utani, and pretty much every character in the show has an opposite. Whether it's Morrow and Kersh, Wendy and Xeno, Joe and Slightly, yeah, all there. Following the themes of voyeurism, we then see the Eye watching Wendy while Wendy's watching the Xenomorph. We then have Kersh watching her. This continues the themes of characters watching others, which has been seen in a lot of cases. Wendy watched her brother while Boy watched her watching her brother, and Kersh has been spying on Slightly. Also, if you're wondering why I'm wearing glasses as well, I know I keep banging on about this every video, mate, but I've got conjunctivitis, just in case you haven't seen, yeah, in case you haven't seen. I've tried to be creative with it though, like on the 28 years later video, I said I had the rage virus, and then I made myself a Bond villain for the First Light stuff. Every week at the channel with Alien Earth, you know, we try to do something alien themed for these breakdowns, so this week it's the eye. I've got the eye, mate, it's intentional. Nah, but we were going to cover like the entire area in red makeup, but the doctor was like, yeah, don't do that. Don't irritate it. Don't make it worse, you idiot. And Screen Crush is better. You what? Anyway, this is sort of like an Arthur cosplay as well. So sort of like an Arthur cosplay thing I'm working on, or I don't know. But yeah, basically I caught a disease to commit to the bit. Now, this episode is all about Wendy sort of rejecting her humanity and listening to Boy over her brother. But there's others who have gotten into her head. Not only has the Xenomorph, but we also have Kersh. After we hear him talk, we cut to the childlike creature. I don't believe we've seen a Xeno at this stage before, as normally it bursts out the chest and we don't see it until its adult phase. However, here it's like an adolescent, and the next time we see it, it's fully grown. I think the events of Alien happened roughly over the space of 24 hours, so this is quite a rare sight. The way she communicates with it is also similar to the control Ripley 8 had over the species. There, the clone Ripley was acting motherly to the newborn, and Wendy has a clear affection for these specimens. She clicks with it, but it does still jump at her. Somewhat mirrors Nibs, who jumped at Dame Sylvia, and she has a sort of digital lobotomy later in the episode, which it's gonna be fine. I can tell it's already gonna work out fine. There we have Boy's hybrid attacking a human, showing how dangerous they are compared to humans, while an even more dangerous thing also jumps at a hybrid. Later on, Wendy mentions how she wants to reject her humanity, which is a conversation that's mirrored with Joe and Kersh here. He explains that she's enslaved and is owned now. It's human life versus exploitation. She now has a mortal life, but it's a life in servitude, without choice, and purely for someone else's gain. Joe's out of his depth and trying to look after her, and yeah, in the end, it's something that probably isn't going to happen.
That's like an onion asking, how do I take care of a star?
Her watching this animal is also much like how she watched the scorpion in episode 1. She wanted to squash it, but Kersh said to imagine how the scorpion felt menaced by the giants behind the glass. This clearly changed her perspective, and now she's not violent towards these creatures, instead viewing them as something more. This is built on in this episode, as those early conversations are the genesis of her outburst to Dame Sylvia. Her brother, though, is just worried for her safety, despite her being super powerful. Kersh mentions how she took down an adult male Xenomorph on her own, and the lab should be secure, so yeah, everything's gonna be gravy. Joe does correctly guess the flaws here, though.
Safe isn't always about bodies.
Kersh is confused by this, as he just seems to care about how strong the machines are. But we do see in Toodles that, yeah, no one's invincible and that things can go to hell. And it's a big scene where Toodles goes Toodles. It shows that the care for these creatures shouldn't be left in kids' hands though, and ultimately it's what's going to bring the island down. Beyond their bodies, we also know the hybrid's mental health is vulnerable. However, Kersh doesn't even think of this as being a problem. I think in his eyes, if he can make them want to step away from humanity, they'll be able to lose their emotions and become the perfect machine like him. The Xenomorphs also don't have emotion either, and they don't have morality, which is something Ash brought up in the first film.
A survivor, unclouded by conscience or delusions of morality.
Kersh has had a line of supremacy over humanity throughout the whole season. On the way to the crash site, he just considered humans as animals. Regarding Joe, he said how he will die eventually, which is in the same vein as him wondering why Joe thinks he could look after his sister. It's why he's incredulous that Joe thinks that something as powerful as Wendy could end up just living a mundane family life.
And you want her to be a family?
As he says, she could create like faster than light travel, and why waste such potential on a loser like Joe? He's an average Joe with your stupid baseball cards. You moron. He seems like a nice guy though. Hope nothing bad happens to him. Joe also says how they could go 2 years without recharging, which is interesting as they've been recharging her a fair bit. Like the entire bed's a charging station. I do think this line sets up their escape though, and exactly how long that they'll have together. Perhaps his sleeping was also just a force of habit. It shows how much she was holding on humanity, and though she didn't need to sleep, she basically did that out of habit. It all kind of ties back to the aim of the experiments though, which was to basically make machines that were humans. They were at death's door, and Wendy just wanted to find her brother after being granted a second chance. Things have changed though, and just like how Peter Pan wanted Wendy to stay in Neverland, Boy's keeping her here. And every day she spends here, she loses a bit more humanity. So in trying to make a machine that thinks that it's human, what you're really doing is just making a machine that strips away the humanity. Wendy's been warped into this corporate, almost techno cult and is shedding her humanity day by day. This video is brought to you by Bombas. Bombas is a brand that elevates your style while making a meaningful impact. Its creators founded the company in 2013 after discovering socks were the top requested item at homeless shelters. From then on, Bombas set out with a mission. For every pair sold, they donate a pair to someone in need. To date, they've given over 150 million clothing items to those who need them most. The socks are exceptional as well. I'm wearing them right now. Bombas offer a variety of styles for any occasion, from hiking and biking to casual or dressy looks, all crafted with premium materials like merino wool and extra long staple cotton for that luxurious feeling. With a 100% happiness guarantee and free returns, there's no risk in trying them out. Plus, new customers can enjoy 20% off by scanning the QR code or clicking the link in the description and using the code HEAVYSpoilers20 at checkout. It's a purchase that feels good when you wear it and makes you feel good because you're supporting a great cause. So check out Bombas in the description and use the code HEAVYSpoilers20 for 20% off. Thank you again to Bombas for sponsoring today's video. Definitely recommend you check them out, even if you just want to try them. Makes a massive difference when you walk around comfortable, and yeah, cannot recommend them any higher than I've already said. So thank you again to them for sponsoring. Now let's get into the rest of the breakdown. In the lab with Adam, Arthur and Dame, we then see what the true aims for the machines are. They just want Nibs to seem happy, be smiling and waving, and basically charming towards investors. Like it's some sort of Tesla robot show. They basically just want to sell the products and have people hand over their money to live forever. With a caveat. That is, of course, a deal with the devil, as I'm sure they'll have terms and conditions that means Boy owns their lives. And thoughts and memories and everything he wants. Sometimes I feel like Hawley actually wanted to make a Blade Runner show, and a lot of this feels like it's related to the Void Comp test. You might also notice that Atom has the collar turned up on his suit. Had been driving me mad for ages what this was a nod to, but it's the same style to what Burke wore in Aliens. Like Kersh though, Adam doesn't care about fixing Nibs the correct way. Normally, you're getting a child psychologist, and we learn she's always been emotional, which does kind of explain why the crash and the encounter with the eye affected her so much. If you're putting people into machines that already have psychological issues, and your whole thing is just like, just erase their memory, not really fixing the person at their core. I do wonder if the eye's also what made her pregnant, and that somehow this fear infected her. That eyeball as well, it's just the best part of the show for me, and seeing it watching the Beatles, it's just basically going around and infecting things and freaking people out. Now, the way they talk, it does seem that some safeguards and adjustments were implemented at some point, but she's still going against what they want her to be. Humanity and the emotions that come with it are merely an inconvenience to them. Corporate life demands that you just become a drone and work to make sure that the shareholders come first. And editors, if you're watching this, you better make me look good. You stupid fucks. Make the line go up. Adam then demands that they wipe her memory before the crash and change her tribute sliders like it's Pip-Boy. I imagine it's like the movie Companion, where you can set things like agreeability and aggression. The mental health aspects ignored in the end though, and this is so she can make a good impression on the information architects from the Five. He wants machines to act like humans, but do this while behaving like machines. So there's definitely complexity there. Arthur disagrees with doing this to a fault though, and he says that it's basically very far from ethical. On the flip side of this though, Dame agrees to do the dirty work her husband won't. Goes back to their conversation in episode 4, as he wanted to follow the scientific process, while she just seemed to think that Boy is right as he's so far ahead of everyone else. I do think though that, they're pitting her out like she's wanting to just work for the corporation, but I don't know if she's just all about the Benjamins. Is that right? I'm all about the Benjamins. Hey Americans, I'm just like you guys. I'm your cousin from over the pond. So yeah, I think to her, if she does the bad stuff like this, she can stay on the island and make sure the kids are kept safe. To a certain degree, that is. Bit of an awkward situation there though, mate. Bit awkward. His wife has proper done him over, and in some ways led to his death, even if it's more unsightly than her. Arthur did say in episode 4 that the hybrids were not ready and they needed to walk things back. It's interesting that he had concerns about science and rushing ahead, and in this episode, Kersh later mentions the protocols. He says to Toodles how you must follow the scientific method, but everyone seems to be ignoring this. And again, him not following that leads to the lad's downfall. Ultimately, Arthur gets fired and told he'll be shot if he doesn't leave. And yeah, you should have took the firing, mate, eh? Being shot is better than that shit. I do wonder if the fact he's been fired and gets hidden away, though, it means that people won't be looking for his body. Dame might think that he left without saying goodbye because she kind of screwed him over. The staff will think he's probably already left and he's the perfect person to infect. Also, I've been getting comments about how, like, I'm calling her Dame, but Dame is basically, like, in England, it's like the female equivalent to Sir. However, her husband's name's Arthur Sylvia, so I feel like Dame might actually be her first name. We've got characters called Boy. But yeah, my bad if it's just Dame, but it would be weird if it was like Dame Sylvia, because normally with dames it's like Dame Judi Dench, like you do the full name, not just the surname. Either way, I'm not an expert on that, so moving on. I think what this scene shows though, and the series repeatedly, is that in this corporate hellscape, there's the constant threat of firing and the loss of shares that basically makes people go against their own best interests. They are bullied into submission. Now, there is actually an economic theory that the government won't cure homelessness because it's needed as a threat to keep people in line. If there were no homeless people, people would just up and leave their jobs anytime they felt like it. You wouldn't need to work because the government would pay for it. However, the fact you could be homeless if you're fired, ultimately, that keeps you in line. We then cut to Wendy leaving the lab.
The pronunciation's a bit tricky, but I'll get it.
Kind of plays off how Curly just downloaded her French language, like she was in the Matrix.
Omelette de fromage. Omelette de fromage.
But here, you can't learn Xenomorph on Duolingo, so she's gotta do it the old-fashioned way. The Xeno must have been like...
Sorry, do it again?
Joe then expresses his apprehension at having biological weapons in the building. We've always, seen the Xenomorphs as killers that must be wiped out at all costs. You could say it's xenophobic.
I say we take off and nuke the entire site for Morbid.
His sister, though, is more like a bleeding heart, bloody wokey bleeding heart, and she says that the samples in Xenos never chose to come to Earth. We mentioned in our episode 4 breakdown how the show's humanizing the creatures and showing them beyond the killers that they are, which they still are. She, however, has somewhat of a bias. She can stand up against them, and I imagine they may have uploaded her brain into the cloud or something. Well, I hope they have, because Toodles is fucked otherwise. Surely there's like a Steam cloud or something for the guy. Joe then says that humans have brains, think, and have community, while xenomorphs survive, eat, and sleep. However, they do have a hive, and probably a community that all hangs around the Queen. What it does, though, is call back to the conversation that Wendy had with Kersh on the way to the crash site. He mentioned how humans see themselves as the top of the food chain. We ascended to conquer nature and stop being food.
In the animal kingdom, there is always someone bigger or smaller who would eat you alive if they had the chance.
To us, the xenomorphs are mindless animals. The characters here say they're akin to an ant or having a bee infestation. To Wendy, though, they're as sophisticated as us.
They have hives, systems, whole colonies.
Wendy is like...
We all like a bad boy though, don't we?
Yeah, not a fucking terrorist, though, Chris.
You've done a lot of clips on this bit, Matt, you fucking skyver in this script. Now, the creatures have been compared to ants before, and this is something I mentioned in Aliens.
Hey, maybe it's like an ant hive.
Bees, man. Bees have hives.
You know what I mean. There's like one female that runs the whole show.
Joe is rational though and says the Xeno's a killer, but Wendy thinks it could all be fine. I can change him. It's a start of her becoming more than human. She's going beyond rational fear and seeing herself as a protector of life. We have said before she's becoming like the Queen, and I could even see her fitting into that role. Joe clearly doesn't want to do this though, but she says this is a yes place. However, she's often told no and held back from having her own agency. If she asks to leave, yeah, you can guarantee they'll say no. I actually think that by having this mentality in place, this is a yes place, it basically removes their choice. If you have to say yes to everything, yeah, you can see how that removes boundaries. Consent is out the window and they're all enslaved to Boy. Boy just wants to control her, and she even said this in episode 4.
I can speak for myself.
Showing how she was starting to drift from Joe. Slowly, they're seeing that Prodigy owns them. Whether it's them seeing through their eyes or wiping their memories, yeah, they don't have a choice. And Wendy later kicks off at Dame for erasing Nibs' memory. If she was starting to form some kinship with the samples, then at this point, she's fully moving towards becoming one with them. So far, they haven't wanted to control her, and there's no duplicity to them. They just eat, drink, survive, hit the thumbs up, and basically are loyal to their instincts. I do wonder how deep the surveillance goes as well. If Wendy commits a thought crime, she could also have data wiped from her memory banks. Wendy tells Dame Sylvia about how the samples didn't choose to be here, and they're now sort of in custody, which matches her situation perfectly. The samples are just experiments, and she even reclaims her real name. Toodles also tried to gain some autonomy and choose his own name too. So we've seen these rebellious kids breaking free from their masters. Kersh talks with Wendy, seem to have changed her over time as well. She asks if they're people or something else. It's actually very similar to a line that we got in episode 2.
Fear is for animals. You are not animals. Now move.
Her views on the samples have been influenced by Kersh even before she became a machine. He asked if she wanted him to kill a scorpion, like we mentioned earlier. This is something that is dangerous to humans and thus very, very scary. But it isn't deadly to machines. She said not to kill it, which shaped her worldview going forward. I think everything just boils down to perspective, and how the characters do anything is how they do everything. For example, Boy sees everything as a corporate product, and thus he'll take the Xenomorphs and purely try and weaponize them. Wendy, on the other hand, sees life as being precious now, and thus she'll protect them no matter what, and won't exploit them. Kersh said that they can remove all of her humanity, and that in the end she'd become something beyond that. Dame scoffed at it, saying of course he'd say that. He's a machine. Sounding a bit clankophobic there, love. She says to tell her what's wrong though, so that she can fix it. As we see in this episode, she gives up on all her morals just to stay employed, and even betrays her husband. Wendy must now know as well that any quote-unquote problem will be seen as corrupt data that must be purged. Boy Cavalier has shown disdain for Joe, so potentially he could even wipe her brother from her memory. Joe is desperate to get off the island as well, which if he leaves and they then wipe Wendy's memory, it'll be like he never existed. You know, their dad's dead as well, and beyond him, there's nothing tying her back to basically being a human. Now, I don't know if Joe's gonna get off or not. He's going to need a boat or aircraft, and probably someone that will get her to leave as well. Like Boy though, he's not letting her grow up. He wants her life to be like when they were kids, but she's became an adult since then. I do even wonder with the machines if they'll ever even be allowed to grow up, or if they'll just keep wiping their memories back to this starting point. Kind of like how Nibs loses days, you know, could potentially down the line could they end up losing years. Either way, we then cut to a city and see the Utani Prodigy mediation. Last week, I said the Utani city looked like New York City, however, I was corrected, and apparently it's Chicago. This whole scene was hinted at in episode 1 though, and it's what we saw when the Maginot crew were discussing Prodigy. That was a fantastic piece of foreshadowing, as the Maginot crew discussed the company while the mediation scene about their crash was hashed out in the boardroom. Kind of like how their deaths just devolve into a game of numbers and statistics rather than being actual people. Boy even refers to the people in his city as his citizens.
Because now it's my job to figure out why so many of my citizens are dead.
Believe me.
Which I do feel is him sort of saying my citizens as in my property. Kind of feeling like he owns them. It's almost akin to a plantation, and we know the people of his city are also paid in crypts. Boy is also the one who gets the money rather than the actual victims. Tessellate by Alt J plays in the background, which is an interesting choice as the song's written from the perspective of a man trying to get over his ex-wife while with a new girlfriend. It seems like it's being used to describe the situation here. Whale and Utani want their stuff back from Prodigy, and there are two lines that meet. Look, that's all I've got. Want music analysis? Want it back. That's the analysis. And it's used to having want it back. Look, go watch Fantano or something, mate. Fuck off. I'm not, it's a movie and TV show analysis channel, yeah, mate. And we'll have a cup with a dog. Boy Cavalier then swans in late wearing the most diabolical pajamas I've ever seen, and they almost seem like a prison jumpsuit. Now, I really, really hope this whole barefoot thing is like setting up a die-hard situation where he ends up stepping in something. Maybe acid, or even like that goo from the eggs, or maybe even some broken glass. But yeah, I do feel like that's what we're heading towards. Now, not having to wear shoes also shows his privilege. He never needs to worry about stepping in dog poo or needles on the street, and he walks around his own island and these pristine boardrooms. Not that I've stepped in a needle on the street, but you know what I mean. There are actually some tellings of Peter Pan though, where the character goes around barefoot, and this is due to the character's flight ability. So it does sort of feel in line with that. Putting his feet on the table is highly disrespectful, and he's kind of the new money amongst the four. They inherited their wealth, cities, and well, everything, and are more like members of the royal family than, say, someone like Jeff Bezos. She's unfazed and then scoffs at his childish act, and he even shows his contempt, calling this bureaucracy vile. To him, he lives in the future and is moving fast and making trillions.
But in the future, where I live, we move fast and we make trillions.
Again, he's of the move fast and break things mindset that Mark Zuckerberg basically talked about. However, he uses the letter of the law to help him out later. The barrister even says it's a professional hearing and they'll do it professionally, to which he says,
For what?
fines and such are often just seen as the cost of doing business for the rich. Even when Apple got fined, it pretty much didn't matter because they made way more than they got charged for. Like last week, Ed, I saw something about Disney basically getting fined $10 million for basically taking child data from YouTube and using it to sell products and stuff or something. But $10 million to Disney, nothing. Fuck all. Sorry if you're watching this, Disney. I know I'm a Disney shill and a Disney fucking shill.
Or he'll send you to bed without your supper, little boy.
Now, I see his age as being a thing that infuriates the established business, but his behavior warrants this sort of response. Again, like the new tech CEOs of the 2010s, he's upended the world of business, and being very cavalier about it, boy is he. Now the barrister is officiating this meeting on behalf of the five. In reality, he's just a toothless bureaucrat who can't keep the two business titans from bickering. I did like seeing Morrow and Kersh stare at each other though, and this was almost like a boxing press conference. Yutani says how the ship, data, equipment, and all the stuff on board is property of her company. Boy then mentions how the ship didn't crash in the abstract and goes on to imply criminal negligence. He implies it's an attack or the pilot was drunk. Well, the captain was incapacitated at least. In reality, he was working with the chief engineer to ensure that the Maginot crashed on his turf. There he could just secure the samples for himself and get even further ahead than the rest of the five. It's corporate espionage and Morrow of course is aware of this. However, it doesn't seem like he's told Yutani. I do wonder if he's keeping this back and the characters all have their secrets. Perhaps he's not even had to tell her and they're just gonna attack anyway. He mentions how her company's doing a cover-up and that she had alien specimens on the ship. This goes against the conventions and by law, he gets to retain them. She's also kind of inherited this problem. It was her grandmother who sent everyone into space 65 years ago and now she's having to deal with it. Restitution for the damage doesn't seem to interest him though, and the samples are all he cares about. They're priceless. If he can weaponize them, then he can take over whatever city or country he wants. Not to mention the pharmaceutical research and potential for new drugs. He's just negotiating the fees for fun, as he can keep the specimens for as long as the quarantine takes. So again, while he thinks that the rules are a joke, he's more than happy to use the letter of the law to get one over on arrival. The off-world quarantine's also interesting, as it reminds me of Alien Resurrection. The US America was a ship run by the United Systems military, and on it they researched the Xenomorphs. Both it and the Maginot crashed into Earth. One, as we've seen, has led to a major breakthrough in the understanding of the creatures, while one was supposed to be the end of the research of the aliens. Also wonder if it was an off-world research base that we saw the Maginot crashing into on its way to Earth. It might have also been the Renaissance Station in Alien Romulus. This show is set about 20 years before that movie, so it's a bit of a reach, and yeah, they haven't really said it's connected, but we're trying to draw parallels here. Also, the timeline and what is and isn't canon right now, yeah, it's a complete mess. Boy then says it's not safe to hand them over yet. For the planet, again feigning a bleeding heart for the safety of his citizens. He even asks for thoughts and prayers from Yutani. This is a term that you'll often hear after massacres and tragedies. It's always criticised for being completely meaningless, and politicians will often vote against the thing they're now praying doesn't happen again. At the end of the day, it all comes down to money and power for the rich. No citizens were included here, and they're basically just feudal lords. His conspiracy theories about an aircraft smashing into a tower, that also reminded me of 9/11. There, the first responders were sent in, and it was used as an excuse to wage wars for oil. Similar to how Yutani wants to invade Netherland for the samples. But that might be a reach. Either way, Yutani shows how desperate she is, and we go from 15 bill to 50. The meeting then closes as Yutani drops her mask of professionalism and tells the barrister to shut up.
Oh, shut up.
which did make me laugh. Morrow then mentions how the island's upped its security, which we have seen so far. There was a huge presence in episode 4 when Dame and Arthur met, and even Joe has to fill in later on. They plan to extract the Xenomorph after destabilizing the island.
I could have one of the Xenomorphs by the end of the day.
Sorry, Xenomorph. Right guys, I've got a bone to pick with you because I started off these videos, started off these reviews saying Xenomorph for like the first 4 episodes, and then got loads of shit from people saying it was a Xenomorph. So I started changing everything, how I pronounce it, I rewired my brain. And then he comes in and says that. Well, I'm going back to it. Nah, but there's obviously like different ways you can pronounce words, mate. I don't know if you've ever heard of accents and dialects and stuff, but across the world, there's lots of places that pronounce words differently to you. So it's actually a bit stupid when you correct people's pronunciation on YouTube, you fucking dickhead. Either way, Morrow has learned from Cavalier and knows what he needs to do. I'm sorry, I do appreciate your comments. He's getting revenge by recruiting Slightly. He's created his own mole, just like what Boy did with Petrovich. Basically, reverse Unoing it. After the meeting, we then get another head-to-head with Morrow and Kersh. I cannot wait to see these guys have a showdown. Kersh looks down on Morrow for being human, however, Morrow implies he's now going to be obsolete. He's looking over the hybrids who will eventually replace him. Humans will prefer to be put into more durable bodies, and they'll be able to do the jobs of the synths. They were created in the first place due to the dangerous environments on the majority of planets. They could withstand it and then terraform it so humans could live there. This colonization was discussed in Andy and Romulus, and it's originally what they were made for. However, I feel like humans will just be put into like a subscription service hybrid body just so they can pack parcels at like the Prodigy warehouse factory. Forever. The idea that they're obsolete though, that could be seen in Andy, who was saved from the trash by Rain's father. You do get the feeling that Boy's just playing with toys and tossing them away once he gets bored. He's made the synths, the hybrids, and now has moved on to the specimens.
I'll see you soon, old toy.
As smart and clever as Kersh is, he'll be rendered obsolete when the company doesn't need him. Basically, synths expendable. I do feel like this also ties into his secret plan. Boy is ripped into him a few times and has been angry at not getting what he wants when Kersh is supposed to be better than man. This combined with what we see in the episode, it makes me think that he's working against his boss. Kersh knows that Slightly's being recruited by Morrow. He's not shocked by Morrow saying, "I'll see you soon, old toy." Therefore, the fact he's keeping quiet and basically letting this play out is showing that Morrow's part of his plan. By watching Slightly talk to Morrow, he knows the whole plan and can follow it as it progresses. He hasn't told anyone and seems to be the only person other than Slightly who knows they're being spied upon. So why is he doing this?
Why?
Well, Asimov's 3 laws of robotics state, a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. Asimov was mentioned in episode 4 when Boy said technology is indistinguishable from magic. When Toodles said he wanted to be called Isaac, I also wondered if he meant Isaac Asimov. Obviously, you know, he meant Isaac Newton, but saying Isaac again, yeah, my mind did go to that. What it means though is that synths cannot directly harm humans. However, what Kersh can do is allow either the creatures or Morrow to take out Boy. In doing this, Kersh would no longer have a master and he'd finally be free. That's the only reason I can see why he's letting things progress, though you could see that as still harming someone through inaction. But he's clearly not acting on all this suspicious stuff going on. Either way, it's a theory time. I'll not do the theory time, but it's a theory there. I think it's also important to note how the pair mirror one another. Both are controlled by their corporate overlords, and I did wonder if the thing behind both ears was to signify their similarities. Anyway, cutting to Nibs, we see her getting a respec. Her sliders are changed, and Dame says how removing the trauma is a gift. Wish I could like remove the trauma of watching Alien vs Predator Requiem, mate. Either way, it's like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, but ultimately the people in that, they wanted their memories back. That is how people grow and learn from their mistakes. I love this scene though, as we see the events of the show go in reverse. Morrow even said something similar at the crash site to the kids when he was asked about being a synth. There it felt like he wished he could remove the worst parts of being a man. Morrow knows the pain and hurt that comes from losing his daughter and also losing his crew. He even says,
"I gotta get me one of those."
Which is referring to the hybrids, but also a line right out of Batman Begins.
I gotta get me one of those.
I love how Nibs wakes up and says hi, and then we cut to Wendy at her bedside. She even sleeps in what looks like a kid's bed. Wendy was the first person they saw when they woke up in their new bodies, so it's sort of like poetry they rhyme. Nibs then combs her hair in the mirror, which is something that sent her a bit mental in the past. Here she's fine though, and you can also spot the see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil framed in the reflection. This originally was supposed to be about how you shouldn't let negative things cloud you. You should just ignore them, which is something you could apply to Nibs. However, people have said it symbolizes ignorance, and Nibs is now detached from what's going on. I don't know how they'll even explain the specimens to her. Like to her, they just showed up one day. I do wonder if they could even implant memories within her, which is something they also did in Blade Runner. They might do to Wendy, and again remove her brother, so in Neverland they never develop. Nib says it's like she slept for 1,000 years and has clearly lost a lot of time. Reminded me of the ending of AI, where they basically resurrected the mother thousands of years in the future.
I must be a little confused. What day is it?
Surely the wiping of the memory won't go unnoticed though, as the kids all talk about things and can hardly keep secrets. It leads Wendy down the path we mentioned earlier, and thinking Kersh's ideas are the way to go. Nibs can just sense something's wrong though, and Wendy works out that Dame Sylvia was behind it. We then hear Boy reading Peter Pan once again. Once again? It's actually the end of the chapter that he started earlier. In the book, it foreshadowed Peter Pan arriving as Mrs. Darling can see him appear. In a way, it's her seeing the children growing up, or at least trying to stay young forever. Boy Cavalier is Pan, who brought people to stay with him and never grow up. However, this passage being said here, I believe it's referring to Morrow. He's been talking to Slightly for a bit now, and Kersh is Mrs. Darling. He's seeing someone invading his house and talking to his children. Someone trying to corrupt them or lure them astray. Perhaps he's Peter Pan's shadow or something similar. As we saw last week, Morrow manipulating poor old Slightly is causing him to lash out. Both he and Smee were the most childish ones, but he's being forced to grow up. He's being isolated by an adult he shouldn't be talking to, and it's similar how Boy tried to isolate Wendy from her brother. Smee is the only one not really involved in any of the side quests. He's not involved in the lab like Toodles or Curly, nor is he being manipulated like Slightly, and certainly not a favourite of Cavalier. He says how everyone's cranky and says being grown up sucks. Bro just wants to chill out and play games. He's basically that kid who's had like a great childhood while his mates are going through some really bad shit.
We're grown-ups now.
I love the guy who plays Smee though, as he really pulls off the kid trapped in an adult body. Very much like Tom Hanks in Big.
We're still friends though, right?
His mannerisms are expert, as he sulks until Slightly promises him they'll play when he's finished his work. I do wonder how that plays in the whole metaphor, because Smee's Hook's right-hand man, and he's not really close to Morrow, who has a knife for a hand in a hook hand. Slightly then heads to Joe's room. We can see Joe's drawing a map of the compound and basically planning an escape. It even says 90 steps down the corridors to the hybrid's room. So the plan is to probably grab his sister and head out. We also have an unknown room and a question mark on the other side, but I feel like he is gonna explore it. Interestingly, he calls her by Marcy as opposed to her codename Wendy. Then Slightly weirdly comes in looking suspicious, isn't it? What you up to, mate? I love how Joe asks his name as well, and then Morrow speaks in his mind almost like an answer.
Arush.
Not only is he being spied on by Prodigy, but Morrow's watching as well. We then get another superimposition of the egg opening up while over the top of Slightly, showing what his true desire is. The acting is great here though, as Joe seems so desperate to urge him out the room. I love the way Slightly plays it, and he's basically conversing with two people and looks very unhinged, which creeps Joe out. The theme of duality is also shown here as well. We have Slightly stood there with his reflection also in the mirror. He says he wants to show him something and says it'll be fun, which is such a kid thing to do, but what you up to, mate? What you doing here? Luckily he's saved by his squad mate and he looks so confused as to why Slightly's even there. Joe then tries to probe his teammates in order to get away off the island. One of them says about a freaky machine going on the fritz. Again, highlighting how everyone's slightly on edge around the synths. And hey mate, one of them's his sister. They're also wearing rain covers, which reminded me a lot of the planet scenes in Covenant. The general environment also seems similar to Vietnam, and that war was what inspired the costume design in Aliens. He does say, however, that Utani's pissed and will send in her cyborgs, not synths. So it seems like her cyborgs like Morrow are the fighting force for Weyland-Yutani. It makes sense why Morrow mentioned that he loved killing synths. He's probably killed a fair few or even interrogated them as part of corporate warfare. The world building is fantastic here though, and I do wonder where Hybridyne Systems are at, as they haven't been mentioned yet. They were the company that made Ash and Bishop, with the name being a play on the company Cyberdyne from Terminator, which was a movie made by James Cameron, who also made Aliens. The same movie that Hybridyne was name dropped in. It's all connected. Joe then asks about ways on and off the island, and basically is probing if the people protecting the boats are their people. He keeps asking about boats, and it's a dead giveaway. He's trying to escape, mate. The woman says they have a good thing going though, as they're on an island and also getting paid. It's almost like busy work, they're not in danger, and there's no fear of the looming threat of Weyland-Yutani. She just wants to do the easy work, take home some money, and despite the little shop of horrors below them in the lab, she at least feels content. He, on the other hand, just wants to get off the island of Dr. Boyro and dip right out of there. She also says they're just the help. This not only has a racial element to it, but also the fact that they're in servitude to the higher-ups.
We're the muscle, the help.
The line about knowing where the monsters are also reminds me of something that Boy said.
Are you sure you wouldn't like to return them to Yutani and get back to the work at hand?
So I can wake up one day with a Xenomorph in my belly? No, thank you.
Seems everyone is much more comfortable though knowing where the creatures are. Me though, I'd be out of there. Just like I'd never be one of those idiots who visited Jurassic Park. For them, their hands are the safest ones, but I'd be on the first boat out of there. I did wonder if the monsters they were referring to might be those in charge, or even maybe the synths. The Xeno and Wendy are who we cut to next, and both could be seen as a threat. It has now grown and is almost at full size. It seems like the Xenomorph was chill with her, and her pronunciation of the Xenomorph language is actually getting better. Boy could finally be close to having that conversation he was so desperately after in episode 1. I even wonder if she and the hybrids, along with Kersh, will stand together with the creatures. Cutting to Toodles, we then see him chilling out with Curly and Smee. Now I've started to think in the Peter Pan metaphor that Curly is Tinkerbell. She was at Boy, aka Peter Pan's side, and was clearly jealous of Wendy. So yeah, that makes sense, and someone did tell me it. I'm forgotten who you are, but write it below if you're like, that was me. Write it in the comments, that was me, and I'll bet it was you. Yeah, it was you, so give yourself a pat on the back. Either way, Toodles is asked to go to the lab to feed the creatures and also check the data. The chaos that's about to ensue, it happens because Toodles is so adamant to prove himself to Kersh. Machine wouldn't be bothered about doing this, it would just do what it's programmed to, and thus that human element ultimately causes the island's downfall. And it's also a good reason why you need to take 2 people. I do wonder if his eagerness to be at the center of the experiments is also because Toodles was always missed out in the book. He said how the character, would step around the corner and have no real adventures. So he's wanting to go beyond that. By making sure he's the favorite and lying about Curly being with him, he then gets trapped in the container. It's also a continuation of last week where the scientific protocol failed. All errors and things are normally ones that are human, and I love how it's basically a repeat of last week. We even have the green and red lights above the door. He's watched by the Oculus and also the Xenomorph as he goes about his rounds. The plant thing tries to jump scare him, but he knows it's harmless, so it's just like, whatever. I think the lack of fear he has with these creatures, though, is also a reason why he's so cavalier. Any human would probably be on their best behavior. Well, except like the scientist who has lunch next to the specimens. Yeah, but everyone other than her would be very, their guard would be up. Toodles, though, he thinks he's invincible. And that's what makes him just mess about. Like, no way would I be going in there, mate. Send Curly, you go in and I'll wait outside. Now it's during this that we finally see the flying things who eat electrical items. It's foreshadowing that they'll end up eating him, and I absolutely love that detail. The feeding window comes off, and it's here he makes a big mistake. He opens the door as we see the red light showing it's not secure. Isaac Newton was a genius, mate, you idiot. He tries to keep the door open, but is then spooked by the sheep. I love how sheep are like these timid creatures that follow each other, but this one's just on its own and being sinister as fuck. He ends up stuck in there with the bugs, and I love how we see him via the cameras. Their wall nest is also a lot like the Xenomorphs, who secrete things to the walls and build out from there. The specimen is a nightmare-inducing creature that looks a lot like a beetle. It reminded me a lot of the mosquito things in The Mist and a breakdown on the channel now. It's also akin to the Astel natural born of the void from Elden Ring. It spits out a sort of acid that corrodes his skin and fries all of his components. Flies also ingest their food like this, and every time I see this happening, I think of the movie The Fly, where they have that big arm wrestling scene. We hear his motives whir though, and the technical sounds as he dies. He's fed on, and I wonder if the Oculus wants to somehow infect one of the beetle things. It could then fly out and potentially escape through the vents. We do see it closing in as they start to feast, and clearly it has other plans. It's also kind of doing a victory lap and stands up like, yeah, I'm the boss. As this is going on, we hear Boy reading out another passage. This time it's how Peter thins out the Lost Boys when they start to grow up. The original book was much more savage than the Disney movie, and there Peter killed them when they grew up. Here Toodles was growing up and even chose his own name. He's being killed before he can become a full adult. In the book, he got tricked by Tinkerbell, and she basically wanted him to shoot Wendy. So I do wonder if Kersh tricked him here into opening the door by sabotaging the window. Cutting to Wendy, she then confronts Dame Sylvia about what happened. The scientists have slowly lost control of each of the hybrids as the experiment seems like it's failing. Maybe bringing samples to Neverland and using the kids to help experiment, maybe that was a bad idea, mate. Maybe that, mate. Did you think about that? Dame says how she's there to help them, but she's done a pretty crummy job thus far. She even admitted she hadn't had a session with Nibs in quite a while. Cutting to her husband, we see him pack up his things to leave lest he be shot. I never noticed as well that he had a bead seat cover. It's actually a really nice touch that continues the 70s retro futurism of the original. Guy should skip out on packing though and just buy some new clothes when he gets home. Did you know, Arthur, that our merch store right below has lots of things inspired by the show? There we have our Isolation shirt, and one's like our Vitruvian Man one, and also the Game Over one. Lots of different designs on there, and if you buy 3, you get 20% off, so treat yourself. We then see him pick up the photo cube he had earlier. This is his world, but now he's leaving it behind. He tried to have kids with Dame, but the pair couldn't do it, so they had these adopted ones that he's basically walking out on. It's funny as leaving the island is what Joe wants, albeit with his sister. Arthur was also the only one who actually cared. I do wonder if his name is also a reference to the legendary sci-fi author Arthur C. Clarke. He knows he's being watched, and I'm actually surprised they didn't just escort him out or have like a guard on him. Seems mental, they just let him hang about in his office and help Joe with his sister. There's even a blind spot where he can type and turn off the trackers for the hybrids. Also, kinda killed me. They would just take what he was saying at face value and have him like, look at the camera and then look back and go, yep, everything's fine. Why don't you come over here and look at what I'm typing? That also just happens to say it's fine. He just looks at the camera and then back because, yeah, he loves us. I love how Toodles is also up on the monitor as well, and if they were paying attention, they'd know and alert security. As Joe walks in, you can also see a black thing on the wall behind him. This is actually mold. Huge shout out to Tony Toasty for sending me a link in which Hawley addressed this. So it turns out those mysterious guys that we've seen about the compound, spraying the walls, they're actually getting rid of the mold. Hawley said that due to climate change, the temperature's gone up and now places are more moist and moldy. So mystery solved. I love the idea that the place is just moulding away though, and it fits into the notion that everything here is decaying. He's given the bow code, and that really reminds me of Jurassic Park. There we saw Dennis Nedry steal from InGen and try and escape at the ferry, only to get spat in the face by a dinosaur similar to poor Toodles. In the book of Jurassic Park, they actually talk about how that's acidic, and this is sort of a nightmare facility that's playing God, waiting for things to go wrong. The question is though, how long will Marcy survive in the wild? She has 2 years worth of power, but it's not like she can just go and plug into the wall socket. What about if she gets broken? Or she ends up doing a nibs and going mental? I'm pregnant! What do you mean? What the fuck? You can't just put her in a bath of rice like a wet iPhone. Ultimately, Joe leads to the death of Arthur as well. He notices that Toodles' tracker isn't connected. Now, most people would be like, well, I'm not getting paid for this, mate. I'm off. Not my problem. However, Arthur's flaw is that he cares too much.
I noticed how you seem to care.
Yeah, I did. I mean, I do.
This is what made him get fired in the first place, and it's also why he rushes to Toodles. Emotion seen as a weakness, and if he'd been like a machine, he would have just flagged up security or maybe not even cared. He also turned off the hybrid tracker because he cared as well. But in doing this, no one will be able to track Slightly. They may have been able to see Slightly dump him in the vent, but yeah, that's all out the window now. The camera then zooms in on Slightly, and I do think Kersh is making sure this all happens as per whatever plan he's hatching. Morrow then threatens Slightly's mother. He's really lost his humanity, as he too was someone who lost a child, just like her from her point of view. So yeah, not a good dude. Arthur then falls into his lap. The lad's stuck at the code panel and all seems lost as he now has no one to sacrifice. Seems like he's praying, and then Morrow is almost like a voice from heaven who answers his prayers. Sort of a benevolent God guiding him through what he needs to do. Anyway, we see firsthand exactly why humans aren't allowed in the lab. Just like Toodles, he opens up the container, which is reckless, but he cares that much about his children. We then zoom in on his keystrokes, which might be how Slightly knew how to open the egg container. Interestingly, the beetle things don't seem interested in Arthur. It may be because they only eat electrical things. On the flip side of this, the eye eats hay, and I'm guessing that it has to have the diet of whatever its host is. I kinda hope that's the case with the flies, and that they don't ingest organic matter. In doing this, we'd get an actual threat for the machines, cause most of the things probably aren't dangerous enough to them. The episode is also titled The Fly, and clearly a nod to these creatures. And again, maybe even the Cronenberg classic. Slightly has now become Morrow as he traps Arthur in the room with the facehuggers. He's created his own mole he's infected. Again, no one will be looking for him either, as he's been fired and it will be assumed he's left the island. I doubt he'll be wanting to answer WhatsApps from his wife as well. Poor Zaveri was also trapped outside the Mother Control Center, with this scene mirroring her begging to be saved. And then Kersh watches it all happen as he sees Boy cheering. He's shell-like and pretending to fly. I'll take this off because it's fucking stupid doing the rest of the video like this. Guy is just winning and winning, but this fly guy is about to come crashing down. Earlier he read an extract from the Island Come True chapter of Peter Pan. This actually saw Peter return to the island after bringing Wendy and her brothers with him. Things then kinda went crazy, kinda went to hell, and Kersh says everything's okay.
Everything okay?
Affirmative.
Which did remind me of this.
Affirmative.
Affirmative.
Did make me laugh as well, how he just tried to see if Arthur could hear him, but then goes to hide in the air vent. Classic video game tactic. As Morrow said, he's gonna have a bad few days. However, no one will be looking for him, and the chestburster will also be out and about with access to the vents. Basically just gonna spring out and go wherever it wants. No one will know there's a Xenomorph free on the island, which I think is gonna be amazing. Slightly spared the acid-spewing beetle though, who comes to life when he goes back into the room. I do wonder how this is gonna play into it as well. I wonder if it's going to eat Morrow's hand, and the fact that it does this makes me even more sure of my theory that they don't affect humans, only machines. We then close out with Keep Away by Godsmack, a band that I hadn't heard in a very long time. It's a song about wanting to get away from a toxic ex. The lyrics have things like "stay away from me," which could be about multiple people this episode. Slightly could be urging others to stay away from him as he's harmed someone, and Wendy wants Dame Sylvia to leave her alone. Slightly could also want Morrow to leave him alone, and yet lots of things that it could apply to. Either way though, we end with the door to the eggs open, the one to the flies open, and the eye biding its time, waiting for its chance. Mean ass sheep that. Overall, the episode was mainly table setting for the next two episodes, and I can imagine it's about to go off. I hope anyway. If you've enjoyed us going back through this one, then please drop a like on the video and make sure you leave a comment with your thoughts below. If you want to follow us on Instagram and keep up to date with what we're doing as well, then make sure you check us out at Heavy Spoilers. Did you know as well that members of the channel also get early access to videos? If you click the join button, you get at least one breakdown a week before anyone else. Costs just 99 cents a month. We're trying to do everything to make it worth it for you guys, doing lots of videos very, very early. Trying to just make it worth that every month, and we really appreciate everyone who signed up. It really does mean a lot. Now if you want something else to watch, we've got a breakdown of Alien vs Predator on screen right now. Don't make me force you over there, mate. I promise you I'll watch Aliens vs Predator Requiem with you if you don't bloody do it. Nah, mate, go watch it, mate, and I'll be your best friend. I'll invite you to my birthday party and stuff. We'll all have a laugh. Anyway, with that out of the way, thanks for doing it. I'll see you next time.